Sejam bem-vindos ao podcast Physio Frontiers. Essa é uma série especial do portal Fisiortopedia em parceria com a base de dados Pedro Brasil.
O objetivo desse podcast é contribuir para aproximar pesquisa e prática clínica em diferentes contextos, quebrando barreiras linguísticas e trazendo convidados internacionais que fazem a diferença na área.
Eu sou o Bruno Saragioto
E eu sou Tia Yamato.
e juntos nós iremos te guiar nessa jornada pelo mundo.
Prepare-se e
Vem com a gente! Fala pessoal, tudo bem? Bem-vindo a mais um episódio do nosso Physio Frontiers podcast, mais um podcast aqui da família Fisiortopedia, em parceria com a base de dados Pedro Brasil. E nesse episódio aqui, a gente conversou, eu e a Tia, com o Steve Kamper. O Steve Kamper, ele é um afiliado da Universidade de Sydney e ele faz muita pesquisa, relacionando, a evidência com a prática clínica. Então, acho que esse episódio ficou bem legal. O Steve falou bastante sobre a carreira dele, como nos outros episódios, um pouquinho sobre a carreira, como ele chegou aqui, um pouquinho do que ele faz hoje. A gente falou bastante de prática baseada em evidência, porque o Steve fez, é o autor principal ali de uma série da JOSPT, do periódico JOSPT, sobre como ligar a evidência e a prática clínica. Então, esse foi o principal tema desse podcast. A gente discutiu estratégias, de como levar a pesquisa para a prática clínica. Eu acho que ficou um episódio bem bacana aí para vocês. E é isso aí. Espero que vocês gostem. E see you soon. Bye. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Physio Frontiers podcast. Today we have a chat with Professor Steven Kamper. Steve is a professor of allied health at the School of Public Science and the Nepean Blue Mountains Local Health District. He is also a friend and a mentor for both Tia and myself. So welcome, Steve.
Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Bruno. Thanks, Chia. Thanks for having me along.
Yeah,
Great to have you here.
Yeah. So, Steve, I'll start I want to start from the beginning of your career. So, I have a few questions about your career to start. So, you have a very successful career now, but I know physiotherapy wasn't your first choice. Okay. So, how did you end up in a physiotherapy course, and how research got you on the way?
Yeah, so my initial profession was as an environmental scientist. So I did that at university and I worked for a little while.
You finished?
Yeah, I finished. Yeah.
So you are an environmental scientist.
I'm an environmental scientist. There you go. So yeah, I did that and I worked in that industry for a number of years. But at a certain point in time, I guess I was having I guess I couldn't see that taking me somewhere I wanted to go. So I was very, very interested in what I studied and a lot of the stuff that around the environment and so on, that it was interesting, but I couldn't see a career path over a longer period that was really interesting and motivating for me. And yeah, and so the question came, okay, if you want to do something else different, and yeah, I for myself, I'd sort of thought I'm interested in science. I'm interested in the human body. I've always been an active sort of person, and yeah, it was pretty simple as that. Why not physio? And so yeah, I just enrolled in the bachelor degree. So went back, and so that was an interesting thing for me to go from having working a full-time job and having sort of, I guess, a career and so on ahead of me, and go back and work part-time again and be a full-time student.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
So it was good. But I was the weird old guy at uni. I had no friends. Every uni has them. The old dudes walking around. No one.
You're just talking about saving the trees.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, people. Yeah.
And how research got you on the way? Like, how did you choose to go to the academic
and the PhD?
So while I was doing my undergrad, I worked various part-time jobs. I worked a little bit in environmental stuff. I also worked in a cemetery across the road from from the uni. I worked there mowing lawns, did all sorts of different things. And there was an opportunity at the time. Chris Marr was looking for a research assistant. So he was sort of, Chris Marr's research career, I guess, was starting just to take off during the time when I was doing my degree. And so, yeah, I started working there, just doing anything really, bits and pieces on various projects. And that was really the start of that group coming together. The group that's now you guys obviously very familiar with. That group didn't really exist as a group, but that and I just loved it. I really enjoyed the work. I found it really stimulating and interesting, and I like to hang around smart people having conversations, and so that was attractive to me. And I finished my degree, went out and worked in private practice for a couple of years, but I stayed in contact with the people who were working in the group. So by that point, Nick Henschke and James McCauley and so on were sort of part of that group, and Leo Costa was there. And so I'd sort of got to meet them, and while I was working, James contacted me and said, "Oh, I've got a scholarship. Do you want to come back and do a PhD?" So, yeah, okay, that's cool. And there was some things that I found difficult in practice, particularly in private practice. It always generated more questions for me than answers, and so there was some things I found hard about that, and I guess being in research seemed like a better fit for me.
Nice. And so after that, we do know that you also had international experience. So you spent some time in the Netherlands. How was it? Like, did you go there to have different experience? What brought you there?
Yeah, so what brought me there, going to the Netherlands was partly personal and partly professional for me.
Nice.
So the personal side of that is my dad was Dutch, and so I have some family there, and so I have a connection with the country. And I'd for a long time wanted to live out of Australia for a while, and so that was, this opportunity came up. The professional side of it was through my PhD. I'd met Raymond Osterloh and worked with him a little bit, and Chris was sort of starting to develop some links with Raymond and with Maurits van Tulder, and they were quite a high profile and quite a strong group in musculoskeletal world at that point in time. So there was a really nice professional opportunity for me to go and learn somewhere different, and be in a different environment there.
That's cool. How long have you been there? 2 years?
So I was there for 3 years. So I had a fellowship which came from the National Health and Medical Research Council of Australia for 2 years, but it was possible with that fellowship to suspend it for a year if I could find funding otherwise. And so I spent there. After 6 months, I decided already that I'd like to try and extend that time there, and so I started talking with Maurits and with Raymond about what opportunities there would be, and they were able to get some grants for different projects that I worked on, which meant I could extend my time. And
nice.
Yeah.
And Steve, how was your experience, like from the international point of view? Like, did you have any difficulty there? Do you think this experience abroad helped you to better understand international students, for example, that often go to the University of Sydney? How was it for you?
So there was a couple of things I think that made an impression on me, and one of the things, I think it was really a good time for me to go somewhere, because it's the transition between being a PhD student to eventually becoming an independent researcher is a big change in the way that you think about what you do and who you do it with, and that process of taking responsibility for that sort of thing is a big shift that if you want to become an independent researcher, that you have to make. And I think going to a different country forced me into that shift, because it didn't have the support of the group that I was familiar with. And the reality of being there was that actually there wasn't a really strong group environment for me to fit into. And it's sometimes a little bit of a strange thing going with your own funding to another group, because sometimes people don't really know what to do with you, right? They kind of they don't feel like they need
You're
to.
just there, and
you're just there, you know. They just give you a desk and a computer and say, you know, go off. And it was a little bit like that. Yeah, it's a little bit like that. So and so professionally, into the professional development, that what the really important thing that I learned there was that nothing happens unless you make it happen. And that's a bit of a shift from PhD where things are set out and at some level someone else is responsible for your progress. Okay, so your supervisor has some responsibility to make sure you're beyond that. If you want to make things happen, then you have to do it yourself. And so that was something, a really important thing for me to learn. I think, you know, you touched on students coming from different places and being involved in looking after them and so on. One of the things that was really important again for me to learn was so actually in Holland everyone speaks English perfectly, you know. Certainly better than Australians in most cases anyway. But I decided I wanted to try and learn Dutch, and so I spent quite a bit of time and effort learning Dutch and trying to interact in Dutch as much as I could. And I mean, professionally, it didn't really happen all that much. Didn't one or two projects, but it gave me a real sense of what that's like to be trying to be part of what's going on.
Because I think in a social situation they speak Dutch, right?
Well, they
outside
do,
the work.
but not if there's one person who speaks English there, then they'll speak English. But it what it means is socially is if you're speaking to someone or in a small group of people, they'll speak English. But everything else is going on in Dutch, and so you're sort of in a little bubble where you know this sort of English bubble follows you around. But you don't have access to what else is going on. And so again, and you know that, you know, I certainly felt uncomfortable at times in meetings or something at work where, you know, I'll be the only person who can't speak Dutch and everything has to happen in English because there's just this one idiot that can only speak one language, you know. So that, you know, that, and I do think those sort of experiences are important for me to learn, and being how easy it is to come from one place or group into another one. And unless you really make an effort to integrate and make things happen, then they just won't. And so I guess for that for me, that provides some real context for the experience of people coming from somewhere else and into a group. And it's not only professional, it's socially, which is as important to someone's experience, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Good. So Steve, can you tell us a little bit about your current role, your current position? Because you are responsible for building capacity within the local district through clinical research. So for me, it looks like you work reducing the gap between clinical practice and research. How is that in practice?
So my role, so I'm employed by the university, but I'm seconded for half my time to the health district. So Nepean Blue Mountains Local Health District is it's part of the publicly funded health system here. And so that's the state government funds health services, and they do that in sort of local areas. So this is one of the, there's 15 or something around the state. So this is one of the local areas. And one of the things that they want to do within the local area is to get more research happening. And there's all sorts of challenges to doing that. But so basically this is a partnership between the district and the university. And they, so they pay basically half my salary each. And my job in the district is particularly in allied health, but I'm happy to go beyond that to support the clinicians to do research as part of their job. And for me, there's sort of two broad parts of that. One part of it is the capacity and the support and the training and whatever that needs to happen for clinicians. So so oftentimes people might say, okay, I want to do a survey of patients in particular. And so it's just helping them go through all the processes of doing that. What's your research question, and what's, how do we develop a protocol around that? How are you going to analyze it? How are you going to store the data? How are we going to go through ethics? And so we help clinicians go through that process. And then, different groups might say, okay, we want some help with systematic, literature reviews or practice audits or whatever it is. So there's that sort of support part of things. The other part of it is working with the management and executive of the district and saying, okay, there's a structurally, so in the services, there's no room for research, right? There's no time for the clinicians to do it, and there's no infrastructure to support them, and so how are we going to manage that? So how if we want them to do research, how are we going to create an environment? And so part of that is, we work with the research office who do ethics and governance and go, okay, well, how do the systems interact with the clinicians? So that's not such a barrier. And we talk to the executive and say, okay, well, can we have research responsibilities in position descriptions, for example? What would that take? How would we get some funding so to release some clinicians from part of their day-to-day stuff so they can spend some time doing research? How can we get the QI act, the quality improvement activities, how can we make them more robust so they produce better information? So there's sort of the where my work is here.
Okay, but are you able, in your position, are you able to propose like a lifetime intervention and try to implement in the for the whole district? Or...
this is where so am I able to do that? Not directly, because I guess one of the things that I think is important is actually the questions that we address as researchers come out of problems that the health service has. And that's different to certainly the environment that I was trained in and the way that things happen in universities, where actually those questions are in the hands of researchers and academics. And so I don't see it as my job in the district to be saying, hey, we've researched this thing and we need to do it here as well.
Want to implement this.
So that's right. Yeah. So and that's where there's some, obviously I have a line of research that I'm involved in and so that goes on as well. And there's some interaction with what happens in the district. So, we have a big project which will start next year, and we'll run that within the district. But there's a lot of negotiation that needs to happen to, well, how does it fit within the way the service works? So I think for me, an important shift in my mind is from, as a researcher. Well, previously when I thought, okay, as a researcher, I've got to question, how do I design the best study? And then make all the people involved do what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now I think, okay, now we've got context, a service that runs the way it does. How can I design research to fit in there?
Fit in there. Yeah. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
So it's from my point of view, it's a little bit of it's a shift in the way that I can, I think about research design and where it fits and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we talk about here is embedded research, and so that's not researchers coming up with a study and saying we're going to run it in your physio service or your emergency or geriatrics ward. It's how are we going to make a research project which fits within the service itself. So the service itself is the context. The research isn't the context.
That's great.
Right. Yeah. So I'll just change the topic a little bit, just to ask you about the JOSPT series, because you write and coordinate the series, the Leaking Evidence and Prax. I think last time I saw there was 17. Are you still doing it, right?
I am. There's 20 now.
There's 20
so
now.
We just published one, 2 months ago, last month or something like this.
Yeah, the last edition. Okay, that's good. So yeah, well, we're a big fan of it, and our students as well. They just love it, and I think it's a very interesting way to pass on like a simple message, like one by one in different articles. There's not they are like an easy read. And how was it? I want to know the story behind it. Like, did you feel it was necessary? How did you come up with the idea? Did you decide in the editors meeting? So I just want to know a little bit more.
No, so I came up with it from talking to clinicians about research and realizing that, forming a view that often clinicians are worried about the wrong things. So this is they're worried about, I don't understand what logistic regression is, or I don't know how to define a p-value or whatever else. And but actually, for me, that's not what research is about. Research is about questions, and it's about understanding broader topics. And so for me, I guess, and looking around at the way that I see research methods and evidence-based practice taught, and certainly the way that I taught it. I taught a little bit into undergraduate programs, I've done some professional development sort of thing. It felt like it was missing all the stuff which sits underneath research design, and it was a bit of I don't know, it was a sort of a light bulb moment for me, realizing that the whole point of research is to generate information. Right? And actually, what you want from that information, it's to be as unbiased as possible. Okay, and so then I think, okay, well, what's bias? And I went through a process trying to understand what that is, and forming views myself about what that means, and then a study, and it doesn't matter what sort of study it is, RCT or a systematic review or a diagnostic test accuracy study or a cross-sectional cohort or even a case study, whatever. The reason for all the design elements, whatever they are, randomization, the way that you do the analysis, they're all about reducing bias. And so the study is just this machine for getting unbiased information. And the better you build the machine, the more likely is the information you'll get out at the end of it is unbiased. And so then all those features, and whether they're statistical analysis or whether it's something like blinding or whether it's something like how you recruit into a study, they just have a link to bias, and they have a link to this information. And so it seemed to me that those there's more value in just understanding those individual links and putting them in the context. And I guess I just didn't see people going about teaching in that way. And it seemed like it would be something which might be useful to me. The other thing about it that's always a view that I've always had is research is not that hard. Like the principles underneath it are not very, very complicated. You know, there's very complicated statistics that happen in some studies and whatever else, but the idea of why randomization is a good idea is simple.
It's not that complicated, isn't it?
It's not that complicated. You know, the ideas around an intention to treat analysis. It's not complicated. It's simple. And again, so I guess I sort of half make a joke. That's why I like teaching it, because it's not that hard. You know, you don't have to be that smart to teach it, because it's you know, the principles are quite simple. And so, and again, I guess for me, came back to, well, how do I communicate what these principles are? And then it was a matter of writing in a way that clinicians can access, because it sort of became clear to me a long time ago that academics write for academics, right? And we can say, where, you know, this is clinical, we can call it clinical research, or we can call it whatever we like, or we say we want to have impact, but there's a disconnect there, because we don't write it in a way that normal people can understand. We write for each other as researchers. And so then you know, the first part of what I was talking about is the content, and then this is the delivery part. So I need to realize I need to write this in a different way to how I write when I'm writing, you know, a scientific article. And so sort of those two things came together. That came from conversations with clinicians, that idea. And then I just wrote a few of them. And then at the time, Haxby Abbott was the editor-in-chief of JOSPT. And he said, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And it kind of went off the boil a little bit, and took a few years. And eventually Guy Simoneau took over again, and he said, hey, what about this idea? Let's get it going. So then it just started. We started out with, you know, the tap was open full early on, but it's a bit more of a trickle now. So they just don't come out as often, because I don't have time to write them. But and you know, like,
but keep doing it.
I keep doing it, and because I think they're valuable, and I get wonderful feedback from people, and I get good feedback that people are using them, you know, and find them useful. And I think there's lots and lots of things that. Lots of issues that we can address. It's just a matter of making the time to do it. And I learned a hell of a lot from doing it, you know, because you know, writing in that way forces me to have real clarity about what the issue it is. You know, I can't hide behind sentences with big words in it and all that sort of stuff. I need to understand really clearly what it is I'm talking about in order to produce something which is less than 1,000 words and is coherent and clear and all that sort of thing.
That would be my second question. Like, have you received any feedback from clinicians specifically, or from the readers? How was it?
Yeah, so the journal every year does a reader survey, and they you know, usually get 1,000 odd people or whatever else, and the series consistently it's got really good feedback on that survey. Nice. So and particularly in terms of, you know, there's a question around what do you find useful in the journal.
Nice.
And so it scores very highly on that. And because at its heart, the idea is to help clinicians be able to pick up an article and say, is this garbage or not? So is this good information, or is this worthwhile information? So that's sort of what I need to ask myself when I'm thinking about one to write. How's this going to help a clinician when they pick up so yeah, it gets very good feedback from that. Nice. A couple of years ago, I sent around on social media asking who uses it in training programs, and
No.
again, I think we've got from more than 10 countries, 15 or 20
I use
different programs around.
yeah.
So it's great. No, I do
Yeah.
I do need to do this again, actually, so update my own CV.
Yeah.
But so there's that, and also, whenever one comes out, I put it around on social media, and again, get nice feedback, and I'm always happy to pass on the articles if people don't have access to it. That's very keen for that people to ask me, and then I'll send it to them.
Yeah. And so what do you think are still, like, can you tell us one or two, like, main barriers to deliver research to clinicians still?
To deliver, so what
research,
do you mean exactly?
Yeah, to closing the gap.
To close it, to get, so there's I see this in two parts. One part is, how can we help clinicians to use research in their practice? The next part is, how can we encourage clinicians to be involved in research itself? And they're two related but slightly different.
Yeah, I think
things.
the first one would be more interesting, like how, that's fine.
So how do we do that? I mean, I think so sometimes we talk about capability as opposed to capacity, and sometimes the way that I've thought about that is that capacity might be someone's ability to do that. So that's where I guess what I'm doing hopefully helps. So if people understand, what confounding means, then it might make it easier for them to read something. So that's the sort of knowledge capacity. Capability requires capacity, but requires more than that. So that's, how do they fit that into their day? And so I think there is a capacity barrier in terms of people's understanding of research.
Right.
And so again, there's various ways hopefully we can help move that along and improve people's ability to do that. The second part of it is about, how do you fit that in your day? You guys have read lots and lots of research. It takes time. It takes ages. You're going to run a search and find what it is to this is so I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. I mean that, and when people have asked me, I guess I've said individual clinicians have to decide that that's a priority.
That's right.
And that's up to an individual. And yes, that can be, maybe that's really hard within whatever system they work in, whether they work in a private practice or whether they work in a public service. Maybe their boss doesn't give them time to do that. Or maybe if they're the clinic over, that time doesn't generate income. So that's really challenging. And again, as I said, I don't have an answer to that, other than to say that you will not do it if you don't think it's important. And so there's, I don't know, maybe there's a bit I'm missing around how do we demonstrate its importance? How do we show individual clinicians how this is something that should be prioritized?
I'm just asking this because I think, like, since I think we are doing better now. Like, if you look back, I think we are doing better, and we are always trying to close this gap. But can you see this? Like, do you think we are closing the gap, or do you think the gap is still huge? Like, what's your perception?
My perception is that a pretty small proportion of clinicians would regularly read research.
Right. Yeah.
So that would be my impression. And researchers don't help the situation by writing the way that they do. So that's one part of that issue. Another part of the issue is access. So a lot of research sits behind paywalls. That's a big problem.
That's right.
Yeah, but still related to that, because you mentioned, like, right in the way we do as a researcher. At the same time, I do see a lot of researchers and students trying to produce more infographics, media content, Instagram, Twitter. I do think it is great, but at the same time, I do question myself sometimes if this is really the researcher's job. Because, taking me as an example, I have so many things to learn and some challenge in research, and the thing that I want to improve, but to have to add to the list, like media training, for example, and spend some time doing it, is that our job, or do we need someone else, or we need to build better teams at the universities? I don't know.
So, is it our job? I think it is.
To dance on TikTok.
Yeah. No, I think it is. I think it is our job to dance on TikTok because, well, at this point in time, whose job is it? Then not sure who else can do it. I can think of a fantasy society where we have these, knowledge brokers or knowledge transactors, but they don't fit into any established system. They don't fit in universities. They don't fit in clinical practice.
That's right.
That's they're a beautiful idea. So they're a beautiful dream, but I just, in the absence of that, who else is going to do it? The clinicians themselves can't do it. If they could do it, you wouldn't need it. So
if you don't do it, you just don't get the message delivered. Maybe,
that's right. It's exactly right. And I think that this, the science is in a state of transition there, where I think for a long time the answer to that question was probably pretty clear. No, not researcher's job. Now I think that's a question which is a live question. Maybe it is. Personally, I think it probably is. That doesn't solve the issue of where that fits in your day, or where that fits in your, do you have the skills to do it, and if not, how you go about gaining them. But it's, I just don't, in the way that things are at the moment, I just can't see who else can do it.
Yeah. I tend to agree. I don't want to. I don't want to do the TikTok dance, but I tend to agree. All right. So just coming to the end with some final questions. So first, I'll changing from this evidence-based practice talk to your current work involves a lot on working with children and adolescents pain, and TAs part of it. So we know this is a kind of a new area of research. And can you tell us how's the field now? And did you see big change over the last 5 years? Because I think I remember the paper from TA on the backpack. It was, I think it's for 5 years now from that paper.
Think so.
4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years.
And I remember we didn't have much evidence. And how things now? How do you see the area of children and adolescents pain?
I don't see a huge difference, to be honest. I don't think it's changed all that much. And probably the reasons why it's not been so well researched then are not different now. I don't think there's been huge advances. And the issue is that it's not the issue. An issue is like the backpack study that Chia led. There's actually a lot of research there.
Yeah, that's right.
And from memory, there's 70 or 80 studies or something like that in that systematic review. So something like that's a lot of studies addressing this question of are backpacks a problem for back pain in kids. The live question is, why do we keep doing the same studies when we already know the answer to that? My suspicion is we can update that systematic review in 10 years' time, we'll have 150 studies and we'll have the same answer.
That's right.
Probably.
So I don't know the reason for that, to be honest, other than, the sort of stuff that's been done is the easy stuff. It's stuff where we've happened to have a question about pain embedded in a survey somewhere, and we'll just run correlations between that and some other variable. We just finishing up a review on sedentary time and back pain. This is the same thing. There's heaps of studies. They're not very good quality and they don't really show anything.
Yeah.
Again, I think we can update that in 10 years' time. We'll have twice as many studies that are not very good and not showing anything. So, I don't know. I go backwards, forwards a little bit, and I've probably argued that the volume of research is not sufficient. I don't know. Maybe that's not true. Maybe it's not a problem of volume. It's a problem of quality.
It's the quality, isn't it?
But maybe this is related with funding as well. I don't know if it's harder to get funding for, I don't know, in Australia, when you go, I think on the NHMRC, all the funding applications go together. There's no difference by area. So I don't know if it's being harder for you to get funding or if it's increasing.
I don't know. Maybe we're just not that good at it,
Maybe just bad projects.
Look, I mean, it's hard, but everyone can argue that it's hard to get funding in their particular field, and everyone does, right?
That's right.
All right.
So and that's the case, with the grant success rates of 5 or 10% or whatever else. So 90% of studies, applications are not funded. So I don't know that there is a specific reason that there's 10%. Some years ago looked on Pedro and looked at RCTs and systematic reviews or something in pain and broke them down by pediatrics, and it was something like about 10% of the volume.
I'm not sure if you have the same perception, but my perception, at least in Brazil, and probably more specifically in Brazil, is that this area is getting more attention, but not necessarily improving quality of the studies, but at least it's getting more attention. So I don't know if it's the first step.
Getting there.
Probably that's that's probably a good thing.
People are more interested in the studies and discussing.
Okay, so come to our last question, Steve. So this is one that we ask all the episodes. So if you could get back in time, what would you say to young Steve? Now I said young Steve, I'm picturing young Steve, like long hair, like a motorbike, environmental scientist.
How young?
How young?
Because is this like a career question?
More career, like maybe when we started.
Or is this the life question,
No, I think more career. Maybe when you were
starting physio
starting
or starting researching physio. Yeah, you can do a mix of both.
Okay.
First day of the physio school.
I think one of the really big, the way that I see clinical research at the moment, there's two really big and important things happening. One is the pushing researchers to demonstrate the impact of their research. Okay, so going back on, it's not enough just to publish studies. You have to say, well, how has this changed our knowledge, or how has this changed our practice? Particularly, how has this changed our practice? So that's one really big direction. The other really big direction is, how do we involve non-researchers who are important in our questions in our research itself. And so the two important ones there are clinicians and patients particularly. And so those are two key directions that I see research going in at the moment. And I think they're both great directions for things to be happening. And I think they're really, really important to start sort of improving the value of research to society. So they're also both things that I probably didn't think about in any great extent until, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think if there's something that I could, get my head into earlier, and start thinking about earlier, and I would love now to be able to, you guys are familiar with the stuff that Chris Williams and I have done together over 7 or 8 years or whatever, that the sort of lifestyle and pain stuff. I would love to be able to say that body of research has really strong involvement from consumers in what we've done. For example, and so, but I can't, and it is what it is at this point. So I would love to now have way better skills in doing that, and have a really clearer understanding of how I can do my research and incorporate, well, not even incorporate the voice, but have non-researchers as partners.
Earlier.
And real partners, not as the equivalent of another CI on a grant, for example. So someone who's part of setting up the research is not just asking about outcome measures or whatever it is. It's about really having them as part of the process. So that I think they're the things that
nice.
I would like to be better at now.
Very nice. All right. So thank you, Steve. You are a very good friend of ours, and it was really special to have you here today. Thank you so much. And thank you at home for listening and watching us, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thanks, Renee. See ya.